JSA book and his involvement in so many other events during this time, where as one of the elder statesmen, he wasn't necessarily leading the charge, but he certainly packed a very powerful punch in terms of his power set. And very much like Superman, he was the one who could always be counted on to come in at the right moment and make a very important contribution. He might not deliver the final blow to the common foe, but without him, things would not have gone so well for the rest of the team. The next story arc for JSA was titled Darkness Falls, and this was an important arc for Alan, as he did take a more leading role in this arc. And this was perhaps the first arc anywhere that introduced the concept of a really fractured relationship between Alan and his son Todd. Now, it's been a while since I spotlighted Alan Scott during the Bronze Age, so just for those of you who are coming on board with the Spotlight series, in the Bronze Age, Alan discovered that he had a son and a daughter who had been born without his knowledge, and he only found them when they were in their late teens or early 20s. And over the years, it did seem like Alan was closer with his daughter, Jenny Lynn, aka Jade. The reason why is because her powers were based entirely on the Starheart. So she was, before her father became a living Green Lantern, she was the original living Green Lantern, in that her skin at one point turned completely green and stayed green, as did her hair. And she was able to wield the power of the Starheart without a ring and or lantern. She was able to channel the power primarily through a Starheart logo that appeared on the palm or palms of her. I'm trying to remember if it was one or both of her hands. Now, at the time of the Darkness Falls arc, Jade had lost her powers. In the Green Lantern Sentinel Hearts of Darkness 3-part miniseries, the larger, now malevolent part of the Starheart tried to consume Alan and his children. Jade ended up being the one who was able to save her dad and her brother, but at the expense of her powers. Her skin and hair still stayed green. But here now, in Darkness Falls, readers saw that Todd Rice, aka Obsidian, Alan's son, was in a very dark place, pardon the pun. And it was explained that his shadow-based powers really came more from his mother, Rose Canton, aka the Thorn. And at the start of this arc, Jade woke up from a nightmare and had the sense that something very wrong was happening with her brother. And so she was quick to call her dad, who then quickly assembled the JSA, where he explained that Todd had really inherited his dark powers from his mother. Not only that, but Todd had been suffering from declining mental health in recent years. He had been prescribed medication, but now the fear was that Todd was not properly medicating himself, and that the darkness within him was reaching a point where he was becoming very dangerous. And in fact, that was what was happening with Obsidian. He started off by taking revenge against his abusive foster father, Jim Rice. And he didn't kill Jim right then and there, but he certainly laid a pretty consequential beating on his foster father And then readers learned that another longtime JSA foe, Ian Carkle, had partnered himself with Obsidian. And it was established in this arc that the Bronze Age concept of Ian Carkle exposing the JSA to a wild amount of radiation was what caused a number of the original JSAers to stay so young and vital, even into their later years. But now Ian wanted to get that radiation back, and what is more, readers learned that Todd actually had a connection to the Shadowlands, and Ian wanted to have that connection to the Shadowlands for his own nefarious purposes, as though he was really using a very angry and vulnerable Todd Rice to gain that power. So Todd, in his Obsidian form, went out and in pretty quick order managed to imprison much of the JSA in the shadow dimension from which he gained his powers. And it was shown that this was quite horrific. It was more than just having shadows cast on one. It was actually being trapped and being subjected to their deepest inner fears. Todd also figured out that Carkle was just using him, and so he tossed Carkle to the side, which led to a pretty epic confrontation between Todd and his father, Alan. And here Todd laid it all out, where he explained that for years he resented the fact that his father seemed to care more about his sister than Todd himself. And to be fair, at this point at least, Todd wasn't harboring any ill will towards his sister. He had always loved her dearly, even though they only met each other when they were in their late teens. All of his anger and resentment was directed towards Alan, and he accused his father of always coming to save Jenny first, and then if he could save Todd, well, okay. But as far as Todd was concerned, Alan cared completely about Jenny, and Todd was an afterthought. And so Alan did his best to remind his son that, it's not like he abandoned his kids. Rose had abandoned Alan shortly after their wedding night and never told him that she was pregnant and that she was going to give up her children. And Alan felt badly about that, and he felt bad that his son resented him for this. But Alan still had to put his feelings aside and use physical force against his son. But at this point, Todd was so powerful that before making an escape, he consumed Jim Rice entirely and then disappeared. So in the end of the arc, a disheveled-looking Alan, whose costume was pretty well shredded in the fight with his son, returned to Jenny's apartment and basically broke down, saying, "I'm sorry, Jenny, I couldn't save your brother. I wasn't able to save him." And now this wasn't the end of Todd Rice / Obsidian's story. Jeff Johns and Dave Esquire both have come to be well regarded for their ability to plant seeds that will later come to full bloom in later story arcs. And readers would see a second confrontation between Alan and his son, along with Jade's participation in the Princes of Darkness storyline, which is one of the many things which I'm going to have to wait for a later part of episode 116 to talk about just looking at where we are right now. I'm down to my last 5 minutes. And I do need to talk about Alan Scott's involvement in the revival of not one, but two well-regarded, well-loved DC concepts that in 1999/2000 were on the proverbial shelf. And of course, I'm referring to Hal Jordan and the Spectre. So I'll be starting off my talk on part 2 of episode 116 about Day of Judgment. And that will come your way in a couple of weeks, folks, as well as some more talk about Alan's appearances in the JSA. I guess I can use this time now just to remind everybody about ways to get in touch with me, to leave some feedback. The email address is comicsandhistory@gmail.com. As well, you can go over to Facebook and like the Comics and History Facebook page. I love it when I get feedback from you, my friends and listeners, whether it be through email or through the Facebook page. Actually, there is something I need to ask for help with. Just going back to the Justice Be Done arc, one of the things that struck me in this arc is that both Jay Garrick and Ted Grant appear to have gained a pretty significant level of rejuvenation since their experience in Zero Hour, where both were returned to their proper chronological ages, and they both appear to be in their late 70s or early 80s. Here in this first arc of JSA, they are both looking to be in their early 50s, but in very good shape for a man of, say, 52 or 53. Of course, Alan's physical stature could be explained by his rejuvenation prior to Zero Hour. And I'm assuming that for Jay Garrick, it was his connection to the Speed Force that eventually restored a measure of his youth and vitality. I know that in the 90s, 2000s, it was explained that Wildcat had a 9 lives power, which Jeff Johns would quickly do away with. But if anybody can let me know if there were specific issues where Jay and or Ted were physically rejuvenated. I'd just like to see if this was shown on panel or if this was just something which happened off the page and readers had to assume that there were certain events that caused both men to get probably about a good third of their lifespans back. But I better wrap up because I'm getting near the end of my 45 minutes. So folks, until another 2 weeks have come and gone, let's say that this class is in recess.